Hey everybody, welcome to NFL Live on a Friday. There is a dynamic duo in Dallas. We're going to hear from Cowboys head coach Brian Schottenheimer on his new look receiver room, and our crew tells us why this could be the start of something special. Plus, Trey Hendrickson still MIA from OTAs. How long can this standoff actually last? Our Bengals reporter Ben Baby joins the show to tell us everything we need to know about what the heck is going on in Cincinnati. And Bill Barnwell is dishing out the last of his off-season superlatives. Find out who received exactly what this offseason. As we welcome you to NFL Live, I'm Hannah Storm here in the studio. We have Mr. Kevin Clark, the great Mina Kimes, and Bill Barnwell joining us as well. And we're going to start in my adopted hometown, H-Town, with the Houston Texans quarterback C.J. Stroud. He was under siege all of last season. It contributed to a fall off from his stellar rookie season because of that offensive line. He averaged over a yard less per attempt last year compared to his first year, through 7 more picks. I mentioned the O-line. He was sacked 14 more times in 2024 than he was in 2023. Here is his new offensive coordinator, Nick Caley.
Well, it depends on the players we got, and that's not a cop-out. That's the reality of it. So it can evolve, be willing to change and do whatever we need to do that's necessary based on who we have and who we're playing. Whether that's, again, you want to get big in terms of multiple personnel or not, gap schemes or zone schemes, committing to more play action or not, that's going to really be dependent on, what your personnel dictates and who you have available. So again, that's the great part about this year is we get to do a lot of different things and really put a lot of guys in different positions.
Okay, so that is Nick Caley. So can we introduce America to him a little bit? He has college experience, NFL experience, but not a lot of people know much about him.
Yeah, I'll start here. He's one of the most important people in the NFL this year because it's his job to get an elite quarterback back on track. He worked for Sean McVay and Bill Belichick. Those are 2 pretty good coaches to work under, if you haven't noticed. But when you're a passing game coordinator for Sean McVay, you're not calling the shots. So this is a huge leap up for him. For me with the Texans, do not attribute to the quarterback what you can attribute to the offensive line and to the play caller. Last year, it was bad. C.J. Stroud was pressured 50 more times in 2024 than 2023, and it showed. His deep ball went from 58% completion percentage his rookie year to 35% last year. So it's Nick Caley's job. What I like is in his first press conference, C.J. Stroud said that Nick is going to give him a lot of control at the line of scrimmage. Bobby Slowick did not give him that. I felt that Bobby Slowick's protection schemes were, frankly, it's at some points amateurish last year. You combine that with the personnel problems. Kenyon Green, who's now gone, was one of the worst offensive linemen in football last year. There's going to be a big step up here for the Texans. I think that C.J. Stroud's going to get back on track. He is as big a bounce-back candidate as there is in this league.
As we keep obsessing over this O-line as being one of the main reasons why, there wasn't regression for C.J. Stroud.
No.
He just didn't make the leap that a lot of people expected, Mina. Do you think the Texans have done enough to rectify some of those issues?
Yes and no. Yes, because I agree with a lot of what Kevin said there about how the coaching change could potentially help. Watching this Texans offensive line last year, which was a disaster, quite frankly, both in terms of pass protection and run blocking, the thing that also struck me often was they just looked so unprepared for pressure. You saw defenses as the season went on start running more games against them, sending types of blitzes that they routinely struggled to pick up. And so for Nick Caley and for this new look staff, job number 1 is getting the offensive line better prepared for that. The quarterback as well, by the way, he's part of that protection too. So I do think the coaching change could be helpful. But then at a certain point, in January, throughout the season, but in January, the talent on the offensive line matters. And that's where I'm a little bit skeptical because I look at this group and I don't see that much improvement, frankly, and it would be surprising to me if on their own they played that much better than last year.
Yeah, one of the ways to avoid having your mediocre offensive line exposed is to keep them out of 3rd and long, and that's something the Texans could not do last year. They were in 3rd and long game after game after game, and that's because they couldn't run the ball on 1st down. On 1st and 10, they had the worst rushing success rate of any team in football, which is just measuring how often you're staying on schedule, not getting behind the chains. And so for the Texans, one of the things I think we might see Nick Caley do is something he mentioned in that press conference, which is gap scheme, something the Rams did a couple years ago to really revitalize their run game. They had been a zone-heavy run team, and they switched to more gap schemes with Kyron Williams, got some bigger offensive linemen in there, and that really got that run game going. The Texans were a very zone-heavy run team last year, so I wonder if Nick Kelly's brought in some heavier offensive linemen. Cam Robinson's in here, Trent Brown is here, Laken Tomlinson, those guys are all 320, 330 or above. Are they going to be more of a gap run team to kind of give defenses a little more to worry about on first down and then avoid those third and longs as a result?
Yeah, I mean, Stroud sacked 90 times over the course of the last 2 seasons behind only the guy that he was drafted behind, Bryce Young. All right, let's go down I-45 to the Cowboys in search of an upgrade at the wide receiver position. Behind C.D. Lamb, they trade for George Pickens in the offseason, sending draft compensation to the Steelers. New head coach Brian Schottenheimer on what he's been seeing from both wideouts in camp so far.
I think it's great for CD to have someone like George, not that George is a young player, but someone that GP really looks up to in CD. They obviously have trained some together, but that relationship's really cool. And I'm enjoying kind of just sitting back and watching it develop, and the two of them getting together and spending time with Junior Adams. And it's been really cool and fun for me to watch just how it all is beginning to fit together.
And here's why the Cowboys desperately needed another wideout. C.D. Lamb had over 1,600 more receiving yards than the next closest Cowboy player in the last 2 seasons, and that was tight end Jake Ferguson. That is by far the largest difference between a team's top 2 players in receiving yards. I mean, Mina, what do you think this is going to look like for the Cowboys?
I'm really optimistic about this Cowboys offense. I love what these 2 receivers not only do for each other in terms of, taking advantage of the attention that is given to each of them individually, but also what they do for the offense as a whole. So last year, Hannah, CeeDee Lamb, when he was faced single high coverage, was 4th league-wide in yards per game. George Pickens was 8th. If I know that, defensive coordinators know that, which means they're not going to leave their cornerbacks on an island against these 2, which means the Cowboys offense will be running into more favorable looks on the ground. I think they're going to face a lot of too high. And if that offense, if the run game can be more efficient, whoever becomes the lead back, whether it's Jaden Blue or Javonte Williams, then this suddenly, to me, becomes one of the more efficient and explosive offenses in the NFL. So I really like how it all plays together.
Classic good news, bad news situation here for this trade. The good news is George Pickens is going to make the Cowboys a lot better. The bad news is you were the 3rd best team in the NFC East before this trade, and you're still the 3rd best team in the NFC East. But it raises their ceiling on offense. George Pickens, since he entered the league, is the 3rd best vertical receiver behind only Justin Jefferson and Tyreek Hill. That's elite company. And one of the most interesting stats about him that tells the story is that he's one of the best receivers in football when he's not open. He creates open space with his catch radius, with the way he plays. He told me a couple of years ago he believes he's the best player in the world. That's not uncommon for a professional athlete, but what he does with it is the interesting part. He believes he should get the ball on every single snap. Again, not uncommon, but he plays with a violence because of that. He wants to take that aggression out. Hey, I'm not getting the ball on an unsuspecting cornerback or an unsuspecting linebacker. He wants to have extracurricular activities throughout the field because he just thinks he should be the center of attention at all times. That dovetails really well with an owner who wants to be the center of attention all the time. So I'm expecting some interesting press conferences at the very least in Dallas. I'm expecting this to work on the field. Off the field, bigger question, might be for another day.
Believe Jerry Jones, but I also think he's the best GM in the world. So this works out very well for the Cowboys to mix him in with George Pickens. Not only is George Pickens going to make the Cowboys better, but I believe that the Cowboys and Dak Prescott are going to make George Pickens' life not only better, but also easier. To Kevin's point, George Pickens has the second lowest, expected catch rate of any wide receiver in football over the last 3 years, which means he's getting the ball in really tight situations where you would not expect receivers to catch the ball very often. He has exceeded that year after year and is one of the highest catch rates over expectations for the NFL's Next Gen Stats of any receiver in football. And Dak Prescott is really good at placing the football on the kinds of routes George Pickens likes to run. Those back shoulders, those slants, those digs. Dak Prescott's ball placement on those particular routes is consistently excellent. He has not had a guy who's very good running those routes outside of CeeDee Lamb over the past few years. I really love the fit of Pickens with Dak in this offense.
It was interesting to hear his quarterback from last season, Russell Wilson, say this week, really singing his praises and saying, you mentioned his confidence, but he said he believes some of that negativity surrounding Pickens, that he is misunderstood. That was the word that Russell Wilson used. All right. We also have news from Adam Schefter. New on NFL, the Niners and the Eagles are working to finalize a trade that will send edge rusher Bryce Huff to San Francisco for a mid-round pick. This trade cannot and would not be processed until after June 1st, but both sides are working to make it happen. And Huff has already reworked his contract to facilitate the trade. So, Mina, he had been signed to a 3-year, $51 million deal to replace Hassan Reddick, but that was a disappointing season in 2024. What do you make of this trade?
I think it makes sense for both sides. From Philadelphia's standpoint, this is more of a salary dump. They're getting some cap relief from this. And I think he just wasn't a good scheme fit for them, for Vic Fangio's defense, which is why he really didn't see the field that much. And then for San Francisco, he's reunited with Robert Saleh, who got his best play out of him in New York. And again, for that 4-down defense, it makes a lot more sense. You can rush him from a wide 9 alignment, which is what Saleh likes to do. You can bump your first-round draft pick, Mykal Williams, inside to help stop the run. There's not going to be as much pressure on him, I think, to be more complete. And so, I think San Francisco gets a little pass rush juice, which they do desperately need.
Yeah, the Saleh connection, great point there for the Niners' favorite to win the NFC West, according to ESPN Bet. We're just getting started on NFL Live. The Bengals offense brings the fireworks, but can they figure out all their defensive issues? Here, why Kevin believes it's deja vu all over again. And after Derek Carr's retirement, the Saints are in need of someone to steer the ship. Find out why somebody here thinks their answer rests once again with a member of the Manning family. Yearbook time. We've been handing out NFL superlatives. Time now for the NFC South. Starting in New Orleans, Bill Barnwell has the Saints as the team most likely to be dragged into the future. Bill, explain, please.
Well, the Saints did not want to go away from their roster building philosophy of just worrying about the cap later, just pushing everything into the future. But then Derek Carr retired and handed them back $30 million. And now, looking at their roster, there's a series of veterans: Demario Davis, Cameron Jordan, Taysom Hill, Tyrann Mathieu, veterans, core players who are all free agents after this season. If they all get cut or move on, that would hit $50 million onto the Saints cap in dead money next year, but they'd still have $33 million in cap space without having to restructure anybody else for the first time seemingly in a generation. So the Saints can actually see a future where they're not cap constrained from the first moment the offseason begins.
I'll believe that when I see it, Bill Barnwell. But yes, you are exactly right. The Saints have never wanted to hit the reset button basically in the last 20 years, and Derek Carr went ahead and pressed the reset button for them. It's one of the best gifts Derek Carr could ever give the New Orleans Saints, is saying, hey, you're in a rebuild now, okay? That's better than anything he could have done on the field, especially once he got injured in 2025. To me, I'm looking at this saying, you need to familiarize yourself not with Tyler Shuck or Spencer Rattler or Jake Haener if he gets healthy. If you're a Saints fan, you need to familiarize yourself with Arch Manning and John Mateer and all of the 2026 NFL draft quarterbacks, because that's the end of the pool you guys are going to be on. And if people are saying, Kevin, Arch Manning might not come out in 2026, well, good news, the Saints are going to be bad following season as well. So they'll be in the mix for Arch Manning for a long time. I just don't see a lot of talent. I'm sorry. This will ultimately be good for Saints fans. Just relax. It's going to be okay.
That would be so crazy, because the last time they took a quarterback in the first 2 rounds was his grandfather, Archie Manning, second overall. Wouldn't that be wild? All right, Bill, perfect. Now you say the team least likely to worry about tomorrow are the Atlanta Falcons. They haven't had a winning season in 7 years. So how so, my friend?
Yeah, Hannah, the fact that they haven't had a winning season in 7 years makes me think they should be approaching this slowly. Instead, they appear to be accelerating and thinking they're one player away. They needed edge rushers. Their pass rush has been terrible for a decade now, but they go out and trade a future first-round pick for James Pierce in the draft after taking Jalen Walker earlier in the first round. That's just a lot of draft capital to give up for a situation where we don't know if they're one player away. History tells us this is a trade that most teams come to regret. It can occasionally be a disaster. I'm thinking about the Broncos trading a future first-round pick and getting Alphonso Smith, and the Seahawks landing a guy by the name of Earl Thomas, who worked out pretty well for them. This is just a trade that teams do not make anymore in the NFL, and the Falcons seem to have been more desperate than calculated with their move.
I think that the Falcons offseason as a whole is representative of, well, shall I say, the job security of the front office, which is why you always get nervous when you have GMs on the hot seat, because they're acting not just out of long-term interest, but out of short-term interest, to Bill's point. Which isn't to say I disagree with everything they did. I mean, I like some of the players they added. I'm particularly intrigued by Jalen Walker, who they took in the first round without trading up to go get him. He's a really fascinating player in Georgia's scheme. He's a little bit of a tweener, came in as an off-ball linebacker, but I think has the necessary speed and pass rush ability to be really effective in Raheem Morris's defense. But if he does feel like one of those two pass rushers they drafted in the first round has to be productive immediately based on the way that they've approached this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, and you can see why they went all in. Only 31 sacks last season. That was 31st in the NFL, ahead of only the Patriots. Okay, Bill, you say the team most likely to petition the NFL to use an extra football is Tampa Bay. Now, you used that one for the Texans last year. So what do you expect from the Bucs?
You can always use a good superlative again. There's no rule saying you can't use it twice. And the Bucs just have too many playmakers to work with here. They brought back every single player who either caught a pass or ran with the football on offense last year. They're getting Chris Godwin back from his season-ending injury. And then they used their first-round pick on Emeka Ibuka, who's going to be a really exciting prospect at wide receiver as well. Nothing wrong with this philosophy. Adding playmakers is not the problem. But for first-time offensive coordinator Josh Grizzard, this is really fascinating. You have a lot of players who are expecting a fair number of targets, fair number of carries. You're going to have to meter that out a bit, and it's going to be on Baker Mayfield to get the ball and spread it around to all these different playmakers as well. So it's a good problem to have, but it's still kind of a problem in Tampa Bay.
I don't know if it's a problem, Bill Barnwell. First of all, I think Baker Mayfield can spread it around. But when I look at this Bucs franchise, I go back to a line that Billy Beane had in Moneyball 20 years ago. When you have to do something, you're screwed, right? The way the Bucs draft now is for value. They're drafting because their roster is so good, like the Eagles do, like the Ravens do, like the Rams do. These top-of-the-line franchises who understand you stack positions, you just take best player available, and you go from there. They obviously need to take a step forward in their secondary, but they drafted Benjamin Morrison out of Notre Dame in the second round. Hannah can tell you a lot about that. But I'm looking at this roster and I'm saying the way they're stacking talent, Bill, at some point we're going to wake up and they're going to be undeniable Super Bowl contenders. It might not be this year, but in a couple of years they're building towards that because Jason Light is one of the best GMs in all of football. And the way they draft and the fact that they had a luxury at wide receiver and they took another one, they're doing value picks. That's how you win Super Bowls.
Yeah, I mean, even if you look at last season, their pass catchers caught 41 touchdowns. That was tied with the Ravens for the second most in the NFL behind the Bengals. We're going to talk about them later, by the way. Finally, the Panthers. They are the team that Bill says is most likely to have definitely solved their problem this time for sure. Which I like. Bill, it seems like they're always solving problems. What do you like about this offseason?
Yeah, they want to get that wide receiver to the first team since the 2005 Lions to use 3 top 40 picks in consecutive drafts on wide receivers. I don't know if they're even 1 for 2 so far. They really get kind of up and down. They traded Jonathan Mingo quickly, so he's not going to be the guy, but they love Ted McMillan. And I like him as a player. Just wonder if you're going to get the most out of him given where he was successful in college. He averaged more than 4 yards per route run working out of the slot, more route 2 when he was working outside. But look at the Panthers last year. Their best wide receivers were Adam Thielen and Jalen Coker, 2 guys who were most effective working out of the slot themselves. So sort of wonder how they use McMillan, where they position him. They might not get the most out of him if they keep him as that sort of pure outside X receiver.
I think he can win outside Bill, which is, I agree with you, how he's going to primarily be used. And most importantly, I just love what he does for Bryce Young. You know, I went back and watched some of Young's later starts this past week. And one thing that really struck me was the level of trust he started showing in his receivers. This was in contrast to earlier in his career, but he was throwing aggressively with anticipation, not waiting for guys to get open, giving the opportunity to make plays. Often, they did not make plays and reward him, but that's why I love the McMillan pick so much. You know, in college, he was second amongst all FBS receivers in contested catches. And you really saw the body control, the strength at the catch point, a lot of the, I think, attributes that the Panthers so desperately need. So I'm very optimistic about this pick. I really liked it, even if it is a position that, to Bill's point, they've been trying to get better at for some time now.
I mean, Young had an 85 total QBR in those last 3 weeks of the season. That was just behind Herbert and Mahomes, to your point, Mina. All right, still to come. I said we were going to talk about the Bengals. Their fans are used to shouting out "Who Day," but lately it's like, give him a payday, okay? We have latest, a live report from Cincinnati coming up, and the Bengals have 100 days to get a deal done with their star edge rusher. They said mark it down, circle it twice, 100 days away from Sunday kickoff.
Lowe's knows you want your first cookout.
I've been open and transparent about however it looks for me in Cincinnati or not.
If you're Trey Hendrickson, you're looking at all your buddies getting paid, and you're starting to wonder, hey, you guys could have just told me, like, I'm on deck, and I have no problem being patient.
I'm training to be the best Trey Hendrickson I can be, and however that looks, and whatever team, we can address that.
That's a bad look for the organization, and it looks like they told them one thing and doing another.
I have prepared my family for if we're not there, is that, something we're willing to do.
Goodness gracious, we have been talking about this forever. Trey Hendrickson, who led the NFL in sacks last season, is still awaiting a new deal with the Bengals. And for the very latest, and he's been asked this question thousands of times, Ben Baby joins us. Ben, what is going on this front?
Hannah, you might want to grab some popcorn, some fruit snacks, maybe some beaver nuggets from Buc-ee's, and settle in for a little bit, because this stalemate is going for a while here. When we last talked to Trey Hendrickson, he made a very clear indication that he does not want to play out the final year of his current deal. And Hendrickson is looking for a long-term deal with guarantees, and the team is eyeing a short-term deal. And Hendrickson believes that what he's looking for is an appropriate indicator of where his value really lies. And so trying to find that middle ground and seeing which side budgets first, that's going to be the big question in getting this resolved. And going back to the league meetings in which I asked Bengals Executive Vice President Katie Blackburn about what it's going to take to keep Hendrickson happy in 2025 and in Cincinnati, I got the sense that it needed both sides coming together, with Hendrickson perhaps moving a lot closer to the Bengals and him moving towards his angle. And talking to guys in the locker room, there's been a lot of support for where he's at and for how he's went about things. Jamar Chase said this week that he loved the energy that Hendrickson brought when he was at practice just a few weeks ago, and that he deserves to be paid. And it's a sentiment that even Joe Burrow has echoed. But the big question, are the Bengals going to invest in someone who turns 31 this year? I think that's a big heart of the matter, because the Bengals definitely have the money to do it if they want.
So, and that's key, because the perception of the Bengals is this team just doesn't have enough money, right, to get things done. But they signed Higgins, they signed Chase, and now they have enough money, as you said, for Hendrickson. But here's what I don't get, and if this is maybe indicative of the way they do business, why isn't their first-round draft pick, Shamar Stewart, not participating in OTAs, hasn't signed his rookie deal? What's going on there?
Yeah, I don't know how the Bengals are getting through practice right now with all these edge rushers currently out, but definitely Shamar Stewart has been one that every time we're out there on the sideline watching from a distance, and it's been a situation that's never really been right from the beginning. At the very outset of the negotiations, there was a dispute over the training camp roster bonus from a source who is familiar with those negotiations and how they've gone. That got settled pretty quickly from what I was told. It then shifted towards a situation regarding the contract language, and this is a big part that potentially could void future guarantees. In Shamar's side, they're looking for language that's similar to what other players have had. And while the Bengals do contend that it's a fairly standard contract that rookies get, we do know that they are fiercely protective of that guaranteed money and really do not want that to turn into dead money in future years and in talking to Shamar, he wants to be on the field as quickly as possible, wants to be getting physical reps instead of these mental reps, but he also wants to minimize that risk. And whether those sides can iron out that language, that's going to be huge. The interesting thing about this and why it's unique, he hasn't signed that participation waiver. He wants to exercise all of his leverage that he can right now to make sure he's got a contract he feels comfortable with as he starts this rookie season.
I just keep thinking about Al Golden coming into Cincinnati. He doesn't have any players. Ben Baby, maybe one day we'll talk X's and O's instead of contracts, my friend. Thank you. What do you think of what you just heard, of sort of everything that's going on? I mean, obviously they spent so much money on the offensive side of the ball.
If you took the team name off and you just described the situation, you'd guess Cincinnati Bengals. With Shamar Stewart, with Trey Hendrickson, this is how they operate. They have the contract drama of the Cowboys, but normally they don't have the cash of the Cowboys. They're their older, weirder cousin in those situations, okay? But when I look at this Bengals team, I'm thinking about a team that needs to hit the ground running. Joe Burrow got better as the season went along last year. His quarterback rating increased from September on to October, November, and then December. But it was 105 in September, so he's still really good then. But they need to be really sharp in week one. They're not going to be because of the contract drama with their edge rushers. Ben Baby wrote on ESPN.com recently that Trey Hendrickson was 48% of their sacks. Why are you playing games with 48% of your sacks? I don't care that you're over 30 years old, okay? I'm over 30 years old. I feel great. And so you can give me as many contracts as you'd like, ESPN. And so when I'm looking at the situation, I don't know if Lou Anarumo was the problem, okay? I don't know if Al Golden is even going to be upgrade over Lou Anarumo, okay? But what I do know is that they need to get their contract situation settled. They need to be introspective about why they have these slow starts, because I don't think it's anything to do with preseason reps or training camp. It's to do with contract stuff that never gets resolved.
Ooh, how to follow that? Older, weirder cousin. They're like the Shelbyville
So
of
good, right?
the NFL. I think that the Bengals are betting that Al Golden can do a better job developing young players than Lou Anarumo. Obviously had a ton of success in college, because developing young players has been the problem with this defense. Now you could also argue identifying and drafting young players has been the bigger issue. No question about that. But I do think that there are players, particularly in the secondary, that at least have promise. It's not devoid of talent. You have DBs who at various points have played well. Dax Hill, who was injured much of last season, has played well. Cam Taylor-Britt, plays corner on the outside, has had stretches where he's looked good. Geno Smith was great 2 years ago in Baltimore, by the way. So if I'm Al Golden, I think my biggest hope really starts in the back end, that you can get some of those players to be more consistent, or in the case of like a Stone, return to the form we saw a couple years ago.
Yeah, and it's not just that they have to play well, but where they have to play well specifically, and that's in the red zone. That was the biggest problem for the Bengals defense last year, outside of the fact that they had nobody who could rush the passer besides Trey Hendrickson. They were 30th in red zone touchdown rate allowed last year. And when quarterbacks threw against them in the red zone, they scored touchdowns on 34% of their pass attempts, the highest rate for any team in football. And that some of that is talent, but a lot of it is just communication. It's working together. It's, manipulating routes. It's dealing with crossers and picks and all that stuff. And it's about really mental stuff, even more than the physical talent stuff in those kind of tight quarters. So I know that Trey Hendrickson's going to be the big story. They have to get him signed. I agree with Kevin wholeheartedly. But Al Golden has to coach up that back end. They have to play better, have to play smarter. That was really the thing that worked on this Super Bowl run a couple of years ago. That was such a smart defense, so good at passing routes off, so good at not making mistakes that were going to cost them big plays. That's not been the case in Cincinnati over the past couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, just consider they scored 30 or more points 8 times last season. They lost half of those games. That's tied for the most in NFL history. All right, coming up, Travis Kelce is back for his 13th season in the NFL. Hear why his quarterback is convinced that 2025 won't be his last.
He doesn't seem like a guy that it's his last ride, like he's tired of the job. I mean, he's in here, he's working. I know his body feels good. I think it feels better than even last year.
At Ace, however you grill, we've got the perfect one for you. Because only your local Ace has all the best brands in one place, like Weber, Big Green Egg, Traeger, and Blackstone. That sounds pretty perfect.
Ace is the place. The Cleveland Browns, who have had one of the messiest, ugliest quarterback situations in the league for years, are taking a whole group of quarterbacks and putting them together.
I just always approached every day as if I'm the starter, no matter where I was on the depth chart.
You've got 4 guys that are starting caliber quarterbacks in the NFL.
Then I can talk on things, and hopefully they listen. I'm not a mentor. I play football.
That's Joe Flacco, obviously the most experienced player in this quarterback room, 40 years old, 191 starts in the NFL. Kenny Pickett, only other quarterback with NFL experience who's healthy, 25 starts in 3 seasons, 24 with the Steelers and 1 last year with the Eagles. And then, of course, you have rookies Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders also vying for a spot. Time for In Case You Missed It. Here's Browns wideout Jerry Jeudy from OTAs weighing in on the quarterback competition.
I like it, because that's just making each quarterback get better, compete against each other, really drive them to really be the best version of themselves. So, you always want that as a quarterback.
You throughout your
career. For a quarterback. Go
ahead. Bill, which of the 4 do you think is the best fit for the offense?
I would say Joe Flacco because of what he does in the play-action game. Kevin Stefanski's best offenses have been with heavy doses of play-action, and when he was in Cleveland a couple years ago, Joe Flacco's QBR was 45 points better with play-action than it was without play-action. The quarterback to rely on is none of these quarterbacks. Rely on the run game and then work the play-action off of that.
Hey, I don't know if it matters, and it probably won't, but Kevin Stefanski kind of owes Joe Flacco, don't you think, for what Flacco has done for him in his career? All right, in case you missed it, here's Patrick Mahomes on Travis Kelce's decision to return and play for the Chiefs again this season.
If it's the last ride, you would never know. I mean, the way he's talking about football, the way he's talking about working and trying to be even better this year than he was last year. I mean, he's not. It doesn't seem like a guy that it's his last ride. Like he's tired of the job. I mean, he's in here, he's working. I know his body feels good. I think it feels better than even last year before going into last season. Just because I think he's motivated to go out there and have an even better year than he had this last.
Yeah, I mean, we saw Kelce take a step back at times last season. What do you expect going forward?
I think that for Kansas City, the challenge this year is going to be managing his workload to ensure he is the best version of himself come January when inevitably they'll be playing and need him. And I really think that something that has to happen in this Chiefs offense is they need another answer versus zone coverage. You saw Xavier Worthy really emerge as Patrick Mahomes' favorite target versus man, but Travis Kelce dominated targets versus zone as he has over the course of his career. He had 65. The next closest Chiefs receiver had 35. So whether it's a Noah Gray or a young receiver, maybe Rashee Rice when he comes back, somebody else has to help manage that particular part of the offense.
Yeah, Mahomes best in the NFL against the zone, 75 QBR. All right, meanwhile, let's go to Indy. The Colts held their first OTA practice this week. Here's their head coach, Shane Steichen, on their quarterback competition. This is what he said, and I quote, "It's an open competition. Those guys are competing. We're breaking down the reps. They're both getting 1 reps. They're both getting 2 reps. I think through OTAs, we've got 9 good practices. They'll both get about 170 reps apiece with those guys, with the 1s and the 2s. We'll flip-flop them." We got Anthony Richardson. We got Daniel Jones. Equal reps. How do you like it, Kevin?
I think the whole situation's a little stupid, to be quite honest with you. I think that the way the Colts have played this out, giving Daniel Jones $14 million is never the answer to anything. I think they've mismanaged Anthony Richardson, okay? He's thrown 348 passes at the NFL level for a guy who needed to play a lot of football. You undercut him last year by benching him. I understand maybe needed a couple weeks off, but I just don't know what you were thinking as far as drafting a project and not letting him play football. Now you're going to have him split reps. We know those are hard to come by in the modern NFL with modern training camp rules and how practices work. The fact that he's going to get 170 reps, again, that is half of the reps, the number that he's had of total NFL throws. It's just not enough. You've got to let him practice more. You've got to let him play more.
Completed only 48% of his passes last year. Kevin says, stupid. That's the way you're handling this.
Broken process.
Still ahead. Bill is dishing out some offseason superlatives. The NFC North. Oh, and here's Dan Campbell.
It's awesome, man. I mean, to me, by the end of the year, we ought to be just scarred up, We should be scarred up and ready to go, hardened for battle and ready for the playoffs.
You know Harbor Freight for affordability, but durability goes right along with it. You see, we test, and then we test again. Now, it's time for you to put us to the test. Whatever you do, do it for less at Harbor Freight.
This is the best Chipotle order.
I would like a bowl.
Triple wrap.
Mild, medium, hot.
Then dip it in here.
Sour cream inside the vinaigrette.
2 tortillas. If you know, you know.
Lettuce, cheese, guac.
Yes.
Oh, that is good.
Reaching your financial goals can feel impossible. Credit Karma gives you personalized guidance to improve your credit, savings, taxes, and more, so you can find your way to money. Intuit Credit Karma. Karma you can count on.
You're him.
On June 6th,
How do I start doing what you do?
the John Wick franchise spins off.
Looks like you already have.
Rated R.
And the campfire chicken for you.
Oh.
Let me know what you think.
I know chickens can't fly, but can they swim?
Deep campfire flavors inspire deep campfire thoughts. Only for summer at Cracker Barrel.
The salt on that Dos Equis could have ended up in a half-empty pantry. But now, it's lucky enough to find itself circling a crisp, refreshing dressed Dos Equis. Congratulations, Salt.
The DQ Sauced and Tossed Chicken Strip Basket comes in your choice of honey barbecue or new buffalo, layered with flavor from the top, bottom, and everywhere in between. Delicious from every angle. That's the Sauced and Tossed Chicken Strip Basket. Get yours now only at DQ.
Some people just know they could save hundreds on home insurance by checking Allstate first.
First night in the new house. Yes.
Like you know to check the neighbors first, before buying a house.
What was that?
What? Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate.
Park Assist Plus with memory parking in the all-electric Volkswagen ID4, proudly assembled in Chattanooga. Get 0% APR financing or a $5,000 customer bonus on a new 2025 all-electric ID4. Limited inventory available.
Capture moments in color with paint made to last. Only at Sherwin-Williams.
Nearly home.
I just need more space. I feel like I'm suffocating.
Oh no. Is this the episode with the breakup?
How will we find the one?
Okay, let's simmer down now. Y'all need Realtor.com, the app the pros trust most. With over 500,000 new listings every month, you could find the one today.
This could be it.
Better put a key ring on it.
You could say that again.
You better put a key ring on it. Make it real with Realtor.com.
Big news! All-you-can-eat wings and fries is back at Buffalo Wild Wings with boneless and traditional wings. And I'm gonna eat loads of them. Truckloads of traditionals, boatloads of boneless, truckloads of both because it's all you can eat and I don't have to stop.
You know Harbor Freight for affordability, but durability goes right along with it. You see, we test, and then we test again. Now, it's time for you to put us to the test. Whatever you do, do it for less at Harbor Freight.
Here's the next UFC Fight Night from the Apex in Las Vegas, taking place tomorrow. The prelims begin at 6 Eastern, 3 Pacific on ESPN+, followed by the main card on ESPN, ESPN Deportes, and ESPN+, featuring the women's flyweight main event between 4th-ranked Erin Blanchfield and 5th-ranked Macy Barber, as we go right to the superlatives. Yearbook style. We're going to start with the NFC North. Bill, you say Minnesota's the team most likely to flex on the line of scrimmage. Work to the Eagles. What do you think?
Yeah, copying the Super Bowl champs, not the worst idea. They're built from the inside out. Vikings did the same thing. They went out and used their first-round pick on Donovan Jackson, signed Will Fries and Ryan Kelly. From the Vikings, 3 new starters on the interior of their offensive line, and then Javon Hargrave and Jonathan Allen on the interior of their defensive line. question for me now is what are they going to do with their philosophies? They were one of the most pass-happy teams in football last year on offense with J.J. McCarthy coming in. Do they run the ball more with these new guys on the interior? And then on defense, a couple more defensive tackles. Brian Flores blitzed more than anybody else in football. Do they rush 4 more and kind of save those blitzes for key situations? Vikings don't need to make changes, so maybe they're kind of evolving a bit with these moves they've made along the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, Bill, I love that question about whether or not they'll run more, because I think that they're telling us with these moves they want to run the ball more. I don't think Kevin O'Connell didn't run the ball from a philosophical standpoint. I think he knew they were bad at it, and so they did pass a lot, and you saw Sam Darnold under quick pressure in the second half of the season, particularly up the middle. So the hope is, I imagine, that with the solidified interior offensive line, Darisaw back healthy, they have a very good tackle duo, this can be a very quarterback-friendly offense for J.J. McCarthy, where you've got that play-action passing game built off of the wide zone, or it's a mixture of a running game. It's a little more diverse than that. And then, of course, you have all-world receivers in Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and Hawkinson. But it does start with running the football more. I agree with that.
Yeah, let's not forget what the Rams did to them. 9 sacks in that wild card game. All right, Bill, you have the Bears as the most likely to dial up play action. Speaking of, year 2 for Caleb Williams, Ben Johnson calling the plays. So going to see a little Detroit-style play call in there, my friend?
Yeah, I think he's going to copy everything that worked in Detroit and bring it over to Chicago. And one of those things was play action. They ran at the highest rate in football last year, and Jared Goff threw for nearly 2,000 yards just on play action passes alone. Caleb Williams, 30th in play action usage rate, 30th in QBR on those throws. Didn't really look confident, but that makes your quarterback so much easier. Gives him throwing lanes, creates opportunities for the run game, just makes his life easier, and that's what Caleb Williams needed after a rough 2024.
I completely agree, Bill. I don't want to overstate this or exaggerate, but it looks like the Chicago Bears may have solved a problem for the first time in a long time. I think professionalizing that offensive line is really important. Caleb Williams last year had the most unblocked sacks and pressures since Next Gen Stats started keeping track of those. That's really important. When he held the ball too long last year, over 2.5 seconds, he had one of the worst passer ratings and completion percentages in football. I want to see more Jared Goff quick release type stuff from him this year.
Yeah, Williams only ran play action on 19% of his dropbacks last year. All right, next superlative from Bill. He has the Packers as most likely to have a logjam at wide receiver. Josh Jacobs was advocating for a wide receiver run there, Bill. What do you think about this group?
Yeah, I came on NFL Live a few months ago and said the Packers should take Matthew Golden, and then they did take Matthew Golden, and then they took Savion Williams, and now they have an even more loaded and stacked wide receiver room. It kind of points to me that maybe the future is somewhere else for their wide receivers who are coming and hitting free agency. Christian Watson still coming back from his torn ACL, but Romeo Doubs would make sense. A player who was suspended for a game last year for missing a couple practices, reportedly because he didn't love his role in the offense. It's only going to get more crowded now. And for a guy who's going to be a free agent after the year, maybe they try and get trade comp for him now as opposed to letting him hit free agency.
Yeah, Dobbs is the one who's been agitating in the past, but Watson, to me, is the one who feels a little bit redundant with Matthew Golden, who comes in as potentially a reliable threat who can win downfield, big play maker, makes contested catches. You saw that in college. Pairs really well with quarterback in Jordan Love, who loves to throw deep, 5th highest average depth of target in football. And so I think, you saw them pick him for a reason. They want that to be a part of their offense. And I think whether or not Watson can stay healthy could determine whether or not he stays on the team.
They just have to hang on to the football. 25 drops last year. Cannot have that. All right, finally in Detroit, Lions head coach Dan Campbell spoke to the media today. He had a message for anybody who might doubt Detroit. This is new on NFL Live.
Look, give us any nugget you need to. All right, it's all good. We'll take all of that. So give us every excuse, and we will use that, especially when the time is right. But we're not worried about. I'm not worried about that we don't have pass rush. I'm not worried about that we lost 2 coordinators. I'm not worried about the injuries. I'm not worried about the Hall of Fame game. I'm not worried about the schedule. I think it's perfect.
I love it. Absolutely love the attitude. Bill, you say the Lions are the team most likely to be healthier on defense. Kind of goes without saying. Couldn't get any worse than last season, right?
You would hope. Certainly it was a brutal situation for them by the end of that season in that playoff game. And we've talked about Aiden Hutchinson a lot, and of course, the Marcus Davenport and Lee McNeil up front. Let's also think about how many players they got hurt in the secondary. That game against the Commanders, I'm convinced it goes differently if Amik Robertson is not getting injured in the first few moments of that game. That really hurt them in the secondary. They were doing okay on defense up to that point, but the thing with Dan Campbell seems weird to me. Everyone loves the Lions. Who's like angry or skeptical about the Lions? We all think the Lions are a great football team. They won 15 games with all those injuries on defense last year. So they're going to be healthier. They're going to be right in the thick of it come postseason time. And hopefully they're going to have more pieces around in that secondary along with Aiden Hutchinson up front.
Lions defense, if they stayed healthy, would have produced probably one of the best NFC title games we've seen in a long time, because those Eagles and that those Lions rosters were comparable until all those injuries started to hit. I was stunned, Bill, looking at some of these numbers that the Lions were able to put up late in the season, okay? They went 5-2 in their last 7 games, despite being, including the playoffs, despite being the 4th worst scoring defense in football. I'm going to give some advice to the Lions that I give to myself. Mediocrity's okay sometimes. Just get to average this year, be okay, and you can win the Super Bowl.
I think the defense will be better than average, and I'll say this. I think this is going to be one of the best secondaries in the NFL. Last year, they were put in really difficult positions because they were sending so much pressure, playing a ton of man coverage. I think Terrion Arnold is going to be better for it, having kind of gone through the gauntlet. And as Rakestraw comes back healthy, they added DJ Reed, who's one of the more underrated cover corners in the NFL. And then the safety duo. I mean, Kirby Joseph's a ball hawk, and Brian Branch is one of the most versatile Swiss Army knives in the league. Top to bottom, this is an extremely good group. And even if there are issues with pass rush, I think they're going to be enough to carry this defense.
Really quickly, Dan Campbell's not concerned about the coordinators. What about you about the changes, Kevin?
I think Dan Campbell's culture building is as good as it gets. I've spent a lot of time there. I remember when Aaron Glenn was starting his job there, Ben Johnson the same way. They want to be great for Dan Campbell. He's a special type of coach. I don't see a huge drop-off here.